week. Well, welcome everybody. So just because she can't see you, everybody's here. Masood, Ayuri, Grace, and Shen. So hi, Miyuki.
Miyuki did.
She's on the plane to Japan today.
Yeah.
There's already there.
She left yesterday.
Landed yesterday.
He
Oh,
arrived
she left. She left yesterday, or she left?
yesterday.
Yeah. Well, then she's in Japan, but she's probably not going to be watching this because I think she'd be tired. Plus, it's probably the middle of the night. Right now, it is 2:20 a.m. in Tokyo, so she's not up watching this. I was hoping we could start lesson 13 today. Unfortunately, the printer is broken, and so I am unable to. She printed page 1. It's only slightly helpful, so we can. And I'm just not. I give up. I was hoping to do that. There's only so much I can do. My printer at home is broken. I ordered one, but it's not here yet. Nothing is working for me right now. What we are going to do, however, is try to finish from last week. So when Miyuki was here, we had discussed the 10 Commandments, right? We had talked about how God motivates us to want to love Him, and the way we do that is by keeping the commandments that He gives us. And the 10 Commandments, they are really a summary of all that God has done for us. So, or what they are a summary of God's will for us, is what I meant to say. So last week we looked at on page 2, I think it is, or the motivation for doing the commandments, and it's the top of the page where it says love your neighbor as yourself on page 2. And there was a particular passage, Romans 12, 1-2, that is sort of like a guide, if you will, for our motivation. And in the passage, Paul writes, I urge you, brothers and sisters, therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy. Remember that? We looked at that one last week. Do you have it? Did you forget your sheets? I can't print, so I'm forced to look at my computer. Do you have on your phone? Want me to send it to you?
Okay, sure.
What can you do? PDF?
Yeah. You send an email, right?
Yeah. Or do you have an iPhone there or?
Android.
Okay.
It's okay.
No, I'm happy to send you something to look at. Shenley108 at Hotmail.
Yeah.
Okay. Lesson 12. Yeah, by all means. Then you have something. I'm forced to do the same. I only have my computer this morning. I'll send you 13 also, just in case. So I just hit send, so you should have it. Last week we were talking about how what Paul, like if you're driving down the road in your car, looking out your window, and you see, the road, you're going this way down the road, but also in the background you have that mirror, the rear view mirror. Remember this? And I said, in the background, what Paul's saying is, in view of God's mercy, you're going forward, but he's saying, don't forget what's behind you. And what we see is God's mercy in Jesus all the time. And how, I'll share, just to refresh this illustration. I don't know that I said this last week, but one time my wife and I, we went for a big road trip, a big car ride. We drove all the way from Chicago in the United States all the way to visit her sister in Denver. It's about 16 hours of driving. I mean, it's a long drive. And on the drive, there was a big storm. It was following us. First, we drove through the storm, but the storm was so big, it was following us. And we were going as fast as we could, and the storm was, following us like this. So in driving ahead, it was blue sky, but behind us, in the mirror, black clouds and lightning. It's kind of scary because it was a big storm. In a way, that's what Jesus does, is when he died on the cross, we see the storm, we see God's law, we see God's justice, we see God's punishment, but it goes on Jesus, and he stops it from coming to us. And so, moving forward, we have hope and peace and confidence of heaven, because in view of God's mercy, he has saved us from that. So, Paul's point is, in view of God's mercy, what should we do with our Christian lives? And he says, that's the next part of that verse, offer your body as a living sacrifice. This is what we can do. And we talked about that a little bit. We said, that doesn't mean, you should, kill yourself or something like that. But that's what sacrifice is, where you kill the animal to give to God. Instead of killing, he's saying give your whole life to God. And the amount that we can do to say thank you to God is our whole life. How do we do that? Well, follow God's will. And that's what he says in verse 2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. His good, pleasing, and perfect will. So when we talk about God's will, what is God's will? This, by the way, is a big question. What is God's will? If you would ask Christians the answer to this, if you ask 6 Christians this question, they'll get 6 answers. It's a hard question. But one part of the answer should be, and this is the part that everybody, I guess, will and ought to agree on. God's will is number 1. What he reveals, namely the 10 Commandments. Like, everybody knows the 10 Commandments. They are very famous. Even many non-Christians know the 10 Commandments. So, if you want to ask what is God's will, this is a good place to start, 10 Commandments. And we looked at, 2 weeks ago, we looked at 1, 2, and 3. Commandments 1, 2, and 3. And the first 3 commandments, they are about God, our relationship to God. So the first commandment was, these markers are new color. The first commandment is, you shall have no other gods. So, what is God saying with that? You shall have no other gods. I am the only God. Martin Luther said the meaning to this is we should fear, love, and trust in God above all things. Love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. That's how Jesus explained it. That's the first, he says, the greatest commandment. If you follow the first commandment, love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, all the other 9 commandments that follow are very easy. Because if you love God, you're going to do all these other things as well. Right? Number 2 is do not misuse the name of the Lord your God. So, we talked about what is God's name, the different things he says about his name. Names for the Bible, but also everything he reveals about himself. So many people say, well, that means the whole Bible, really. Because everything God reveals about himself in the Bible is telling us about him. Therefore, don't mess that up. So that's pretty serious. It's the reason why he puts it number 2. Number 3 is remember the Sabbath day. What day is the Sabbath day? What day of the week is Sabbath day? We come to church on Sunday, but Jews came on Saturday. So it's not remember Saturday. Shabbat in Hebrew means rest. God says, take a day of rest. Take a day off. Tomorrow you get a day off. It's Canada Day. Good. But that's not what he's talking about. Just, you should have a vacation every so often. Every day, every week, have a day off. Actually, when God gives us rest, Jesus says, come to me, you who are weary and burdened. I'll give you rest for your soul. So this is a way of worship, be in God's word. That's what God wants us to do. With the third. So these 3 commandments are about God. Love God the most, respect and honor his name and his word, and use his word. Like, illustration. If you, let's say your mother who raised you and taught you everything that you know and trained you up to be a loving and kind person, and she paid for your food, your housing, your clothes growing up, and your school, so you have the best start in life. And when you graduate from school, now you can go get a job. How would your relationship with her go if you never called her, visited her, or talked to her again? Just cut her off. And you say, well, my mother taught me so many good things. I'm following that. I'm a good person. I'm a kind person. But I don't need to talk to her. I don't need to listen to her anymore. You would say that's terrible, right? Because she still loves you. She still wants to have you, even if you move away, even if you have a different job somewhere. In a way, that's what the 3rd commandment is about, is recognizing that God still wants to talk to us and have us talk to him, right? And we do that by listening to him speak to us in the Bible. And we do that by praying to him. Like, he wants to engage with us. We don't just cut him off and say, okay, God, I know all about you. Thank you for creating me and for saving me and for loving me, but I want nothing to do with you. So the first 3 commandments are about God and how we relate to him. And that means numbers 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are about our neighbor. They're about our neighbor. Anybody remember what the 4th commandment was that we talked about last week? Sheep. Look on your sheep too. Well, and I love your neighbor as yourself. Is that what? That's the summary for all of these 7 that Jesus gave when he was asked, well, what does this mean? Love your neighbor as yourself. You have it there. Honor your father and mother. Yeah. And this one is about our authority, because it also includes, respecting those who have any authority over us, government, our boss at work, leaders that we have in our life. Like if you go to the swimming pool, the lifeguard has authority over you. Even if you know how to swim, you have to listen to the lifeguard. So people who have authority over you. Number 5, you shall not do not murder. Do not murder. So that one should be 99.9% of people agree with that, even if they don't believe in God. They say, oh yeah, it's wrong to murder. But what does Jesus say murder is?
things to the even think.
Even think, yeah. So instead of hurting people, this commandment is trying to protect our. Yeah, it's speaking against. Don't have evil thoughts that you want to hurt or harm someone's life. Rather, instead of hurting them, we want to protect life. Protect life. So it's protecting life is what I'm suggesting. It's saying that your life matters, and so we shouldn't hurt people. We should protect them. There are a ton of applications to this. We talked about a few of them last week. But this commandment, if it's protecting life and says do not murder, what would it say about, I don't know, doing scientific experiments on people's bodies? What does this commandment say about that? If God says protect life, don't hurt them, and you're going to do experiments on them that would, destroy their body essentially. That'd be a good idea or a bad idea? Bad idea, right? If I'm taking someone's body and saying, now you belong to science and they use you, don't worry, you're going to help a lot of people, but your life, sorry, you're just not a valuable person. We need your brain. We're going to take your brain out and do some experiments on it. That's bad. There are some experiments where it's okay, like people say, hey, I'll volunteer to do that. That's different. But like sometimes, like the Nazis did that. They would take people's bodies against their will and did experiments on them. So that's bad. This one is, number 6 is do not, that's number 7. Do not steal. We haven't, this is as far as we made it. So we made it to 6. Do not commit adultery. What was this one protecting? Do not commit adultery. Marriage. Yeah. God says don't mess up families. Don't mess up marriage. Protect marriage and families because there's a lot of pain that happens when we don't. So today we're going to talk 7, 8, and 9 and 10 kind of go together. 9 and 10 are very, very similar. We'll talk about these 4. But briefly they are, just so you can see a roadmap. Do not steal. Do not give false testimony against your neighbor. I'll just do not give false testimony. Sometimes people just say do not lie, but we'll look at that. And then numbers 9 and 10 could be summarized very simply as do not covet. Do not covet. 1 is house. Number 9 is do not covet your neighbor's house. And do not covet your neighbor's spouse. House and spouse. It's a simple way of remembering. Stuff and people. That's how I would simplify it. So we'll talk about coveting. I don't know if you can see that, Yuki. There you go. Feels weird talking to a computer, but hopefully you will watch this. Okay, so we're going to look at, I guess we're on page, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, page 6, the 7th commandment. You shall not steal. You'll find it?
Yeah.
Okay. And just to review, vocabulary that goes with today. Well, I guess reputation will come to that one in commandment 8. Steal, I didn't put any vocabulary for because it's pretty, I understand the word steal, I think. And the word covet, which is misspelled in the sheet because autocorrect changed it on me. C-O-V-E-T, covet. We'll talk about that. That's a hard word. Covet. Even English speakers don't know what covet means. Oh yeah, a lot of people are like, what does that mean? Covet. They do and they don't. They do and they don't.
Do you have any other words for this?
Mm,
This is a common.
jealous, maybe. It's a little different, but it's in that idea that you have I'm jealous of something. You understand, jealous is negative, covet is negative, but that you want something that isn't yours in a sinful way. Let's talk about the seventh commandment: you shall not steal. Now, the explanation that the small catechism has for this, as all of these, I put this, what does this mean? Then the answer to that is the small catechism. We should fear and love God, that we do not take our neighbor's money or property. So that part is obvious, right? If you see someone's bike and you go, I like that bike, and steal it. A lot of people around here steal bikes. That obviously is stealing, right? Or if someone steals your credit card number and takes your money, that is obviously stealing, right? But now he gets to the other side of it. Or if you get it by dishonest dealing, or if you get it by dishonest dealing, what does that mean? Get it by dishonest dealing.
Dishonest deal.
Yeah, dishonest deal. I'll put it on the board. What is dishonest deal? You all know what this is, even if you've never found a word for it before. A dishonest deal. Well, you see the word honest. That means truthful and good. Dishonest?
Not good.
Fair, like,
Not fair, right? Either it's not fair
not honest,
or untruthful, right? So maybe you see someone's bike, and you're like, they're trying to sell it. You're like, oh, I really like your bike. Can I buy it from you? Yeah, I'll sell it to you. Does everything on the bike work? Oh yeah, it works really great. And then you buy it, and then you start to ride it, and you realize, it's broken. But they told you it worked. That would be untruthful, right? So a dishonest deal is when you present something as good, in fact, it's broken, and they were hiding that. Maybe they just painted over it, right? Oh yeah, the bike's in good shape. They painted it, but then you find out they just painted over rust, and the bike is actually falling apart. They're trying to get rid of it. But if they said, oh, actually the bike is covered in rust, and I painted over the rust to make it look nicer, then you at least, they said the truth, and you can decide, oh, do I really want this bike? Yeah, I don't care. I don't mind the rust. Then you at least know. But it's the untruthful or unfair thing that makes it dishonest. So, can you give an example of some dishonest deal that's, so you just to talk about what this means, that you remember? Maybe you were the victim of a dishonest deal at some point. All of us have them. Yeah.
Actually, 2 cars.
Big problems. It's not fair.
Because I always trust them. So that makes my life so, or it doesn't work at this price. So, I had experience with,
Yep. My wife bought a camera a couple of months ago, and the guy selling it said, "Oh, it works fine," and it worked. But when you take a picture, in every single picture that once you with the new camera, you have your picture, and you can get the stuff in the image, but from the top up, it's like gray on top. You can still see through the gray, but it makes a line. that's terrible. Like it doesn't. It's obviously broken, but she bought his camera and now we're stuck with a camera that doesn't work. So that's dishonest dealing, right? Does it work? Yeah, it works. But but it doesn't.
She should ask, does it work fine?
Are there any problems? She asked, are there any problems? He said, oh, no, it works fine. But he lied. That's dishonest dealing, right? We're all familiar with this. You have to be careful. People are trying to trick you to take your money. Anything with this, Luther says, breaks the seventh commandment. Why?
That's stealing, cheating.
Yeah.
On the deal.
Yeah, you're saying this. So using the camera example, here's the camera, right? This camera is worth $500. That's expensive camera, right? But it's broken. If you knew that it was broken, the value goes down a lot, right? Now, in reality, the camera's probably worth $50 because it gives you a line in every picture. That means you have to edit the pictures down or change them or at least delete out that part that makes the gray line. So is it actually worth $500? No. Maybe if you knew there was a problem, you'd say, okay, I don't care. I can do that for a lower price. So if you knew the cars had a problem, you'd say, either I don't buy them or I buy them, but I have to account for fixing them, and that means
no, because
the value
those problems isn't worth to fix.
So the car is worth very, yeah. But that's the point, is when you have, if you knew there was a problem, you would say this actually isn't worth not much at all. So
in case you should be wise, you should be cheap. Even your wife.
Yeah.
Especially when you buy from Craigslist.
yeah, Craigslist is not a good place for the seventh commandment. There's a lot of dishonest deals on Craigslist.
Place for those guys that want to sell and escape.
Mm-hmm. All right, so this category is very big. There are many ways people cheat or try to take money from you, and you have to be very careful. Otherwise, but also that means for us to be very fair in, if we're the seller selling something, say I want to sell you that camera, but it's not worth much because it creates like a line. Does that bother you? You know, maybe you can have a cheap camera to take good pictures, but you have to delete the top part of the picture every time. Somebody might want that, just to have a nice, or get a different lens or something. Dishonest dealing, instead of doing those stealing or using dishonest dealing, then Luther says, but help him to improve and protect his property and means of income. Help this person, help your friend, to improve their property and means of income. What does that mean? You ever help somebody with their stuff, improve or protect their property, or their job would be means of income, how they make money. So Masood is good at fixing stuff, right? You take something broken. You could improve and protect people's property by fixing something. That's one way. Maybe you found a wallet on the ground before, or someone's phone. Oh no, someone lost their phone. Someone lost their wallet. Instead of going, all right, I got a new phone, or all right, I've got some money here. This person lost their wallet. You know, oh, I could see whose this is. I'm going to try and find that person, give it back. That would be keeping the seventh commandment. Right? So, doing what you can to help people not to lose their things, because it's It's no fun to lose or have something get stolen. Let's talk about Hebrews 13 verse 5. This really gets at the spiritual attitude that God wants us to have about material things. I can give you a couple other passages if you just want to grow in this area, but who wants to read a passage to start with? Hebrews 13 verse 5. Go ahead, Masood.
Hebrews 13:5. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have. As God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you.
Never will I leave you, and never will I forsake you. These passages talk. This particular passage encourages us to avoid something and to seek something. What are we trying to avoid? What are we trying to seek? Avoid this and seek that. Don't ignore what I'm writing so hard. But ignore, he says, keep your lives free from, so avoid loving money. Avoid loving money. Instead, you should want to do this. What you should seek is being content. Being content. Loving money and being content are opposite, aren't they? When you love money, you're seeking more stuff, more money, more things. When you're content, are you seeking more things? No, you're saying, God has given me enough. I can be content with the things that I have. Do I have the best car? No. But that's okay. I have a car. It drives. Do I have the best phone? Nope. It's old. Or it's maybe there's a fancier one. But I have a phone that works and it does what I need. Do you have the biggest house? No. But you have the house that keeps you dry and safe, and it's a nice place to live. This is being content. There's another passage that I think speaks more in depth about this idea. Since we have a little bit of extra time, I might suggest that we look it up. It's 1 Timothy 6, verses 6 to, I guess we'll read, trying to decide how far I read, but you can look up 1 Timothy chapter 6. Yeah, I guess we'll just read 6 to 10. 1 Timothy 6, 6 to 10. And these verses, we'll read this verse and then we'll read another one in the book of Matthew that speak about our Christian attitude towards stuff. Because if you have a good attitude towards stuff, you're not really tempted to steal, right? I'm tempted to steal when there's an opportunity to take something and I really want that thing. so I'm going to take it. Whereas if you're content, even if it's an opportunity, you know, I don't need that. It's someone else's. Let it go. So let's look at these verses here. 1 Timothy chapter 6, 6 to 10. And I will put them on the screen, at least for Miyuki's sake. English study. 1 Timothy 6, 6 to 10. Someone read those verses for us. 1 Timothy 6, 6 to 10. Actually, yeah, Yuri, did you find? Everybody found it? Still looking. Did you find it? Make sure you're in 1 Timothy. Yeah, because there's 2 Timothy also. So it starts with but godliness. See that? Okay, go ahead.
But blindness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and good clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and are trapped and into many foolish and harmful desires that
Plunge.
people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and
Pierced.
themselves with many
Griefs. Yeah. Take a minute to read that in your mother tongue, or look up words if you want. Oh, already? Okay. I'm sorry. That's good. I'm glad you came. Thanks for coming.
So,
Yeah, I think we will definitely next week have a class on July 6th, I think it is. July 7th, excuse me. The following week, we will not have a class because I'm taking off for my family and I are going on a trip for my wife's birthday, our vacation, if you will. Yeah, so next week's our last week and we'll have a break for a couple weeks. No, next week, yes, class. 2 weeks, no class. Yeah. Okay, godliness with contentment is great gain. Paul is talking about, he's again talking about money, and he's saying, look, if you have contentment, you have gained much. On the other hand, verse 10, the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. If you are desiring money and you aren't content, then it's going to lead you down a path towards many problems in a way. I don't even know. I'm just kind of freewheeling it here, but there's a guy named J.P. Rockefeller. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. In the early part of the 20th century, so the early 1900s, he was the richest man in the world by a lot. He invested in oil companies and got into transportation, like trains, and real estate. I mean, he was so much money. One time a reporter asked him, this is a very famous interview, they asked him, Mr. Rockefeller, you have more money than some countries do. You are that rich. You have more money than many countries do, all to themselves. To yourself, you have more money. When will you have enough? When is it enough for you to say you've got enough money? His answer was $1 more. What does he mean by that?
You're gonna have some $1 in hand.
Always one more. Yeah. There's never a limit to where he would say, okay, now I have enough. Greed leads us to always want more. We can never be satisfied. If you have the best, it's not good enough. You need something better. If you have the most, it's not enough. You need to have even more. So the reason why I point that out is to the richest person in the world to say, I am not content. What does it mean for the person like us who's average and has something, but we're not starving, we're not poor, but we certainly are. There are a lot of richer people. Contentment is to say, what I have, I am happy with. If I get no dollars more, I'm still happy. If I lose money, that's okay. If I have more, thanks be to God. This is a different attitude than I need to have more and more and more all the time. So Paul is encouraging us to have contentment. Why? Verse 7, because we brought nothing into the world and we can take nothing out of it. You can't take it with you. One day, whether you're the richest man in the world or you're broke, everything you have is taken away. And so this life, people seek money, but it doesn't help you to stop you from dying. So he's encouraging us, the secret is contentment. And Paul talks about this in several other places. This is the one that came to mind. But he says in Philippians, I know what it's like to have plenty, to be well off and have lots of money and food. And I know what it is to have nothing. And I can be happy in any situation. Let's look at one more passage. I said we would. Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 to 21. And then we'll skip down and read 25 to 34. Go to Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. This is Jesus talking now. Remember what Paul said. You can't take it with you. You can't take it with you. So maybe we'll read 19 to 24 to start. Grace, you found it. You feel ready? Go for it.
Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasure in heaven, where moth and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money.
Good. You cannot serve both God and money. Jesus is talking. He's talking about our attitude towards stuff. And in a way, it's the
approach to keeping the seventh commandment, not to steal, by recognizing he can't serve both God and money or stuff. Now, Paul said, remember, you can't take it with you. You can't take your stuff with you. But Jesus says, he says similar, do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where thieves or moths and vermin, that's like mice and rats, destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. So the question is, what can you store up in heaven if you can't take it with you? Paul said you can't take it with you, right, which is true. And that stuff will get broken, lost, taken away at some point in our life. Our things go away. So what can we take with us to heaven? What could you store up in heaven that you could take with you? Well, our faith is what gets us to heaven. In the book of 1 Corinthians 13, Paul says, we have faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love, because when you get to heaven, you won't need hope anymore because now you're there, and you don't need faith anymore because now you can see God. That doesn't mean you lose faith in God. It just means that faith is fulfilled. So it's not incorrect, but at the same time, there's something else is my point. This is one of those trick questions that people always get kind of stumped on. Like, what can you take with you to heaven? You can't take stuff. The idea is that you're storing up for yourself something that's not you in heaven. What can you take with you to heaven? A good reputation. Yeah, if God says you are my son and you are approved, then that's a good thing. But it's something you can take with you, as in it's like not you. I'll change the question slightly, which will, well, God's in heaven, yeah.
Love God.
I'll change the question slightly, and that'll make it'll make a difference. It's not necessarily a what, but what about a who? Who can you take with you to heaven? He's in heaven already. God is in heaven already. It's someone here who's going to go with you to heaven. Jesus says, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven.
Neighbor.
Your neighbor, your family, people, right? I can take you with me to heaven. We can go to heaven together. I want to take my family with me to heaven. I can't take my stuff. We're not saved by works, so it's not about doing good things. My faith is fulfilled in heaven. The only thing I can take with me to heaven are people. And so when Jesus says, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, what's he saying about how you use your stuff? Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. I want to take people with me. Taking people with me to heaven is the most important thing I can do. How will I use my money, my stuff, in order to accomplish that? Because I can buy myself a giant TV or a new car or go on a vacation that's very expensive and fun. But that doesn't help me get anyone to heaven. On the other hand, I could use my stuff to help people get to heaven. Perhaps that means simple things like buying someone a Bible, or saying I want to support the efforts that Christians will make to reach out in Japan, right? As an example, I want to support Miyuki when she gets her feet settled to go to a Bible study in Japan. What can I do to help her do that? Maybe it takes some money, because if someone wants to start a Bible study in Yokohama, which is what I was saying to her as an idea, then that means someone has to go to Yokohama on a train, which means buying train tickets, which means spending money. So I could tell you, I'll pay for that train ticket so you can go visit her, something like that. We can use our treasures to store up treasures in heaven. Because at the end of the day, having Miyuki be in heaven with us is worth more than a vacation, is worth more than a new TV, is worth more than any of those things. So that's kind of what Jesus is saying. But then he adds at the end of that section, reminding us you cannot serve both God and money. When people break the seventh commandment and are greedy, you're saying, God, what's more important to me than you is this bike, this new phone, this vacation. And Paul says, or Jesus says, serve God first, love him the most, and then whether I have a new bike or an old bike, a new phone or an old phone, whether we go on a fancy vacation or we say, you know what, it's COVID, so let's just go camping. That's cheap. It's okay. So that's the seventh commandment. Going back to the sheet here, the question on the sheet that I had asked was, it's been said keeping the seventh commandment is as simple as keeping the first commandment. How do you find that to be true in your life? So the first commandment, love God the most, love him above all things, helps us keep the seventh commandment. How is that true? No idea. Fair enough. The first commandment is, you shall have no other gods. Love God with all your heart and soul and mind. If I love God so much, then down here when we talk about stuff, I'm saying, God, I trust you to provide me with what I need so that I don't have to steal. I trust you, God, that you're providing me with enough clothing, with enough food, with enough stuff that I need to just get through my daily life, that I don't need to go out and be greedy or try to have a dishonest deal or try to somehow the video cut out for Miyuki. Sorry, Miyuki, we're back. Hopefully that didn't mess it up. Matthew 6:25-34. Masood.
6.
You guys still in Matthew? So now Jesus will explain to us how this is true that we.
6:25.
Yeah, start at 25.
Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father fed them.
Mm-hmm.
Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying add or single hour to your life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon, in all his splendor, was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will no will not much more clothe you, you of little faith. So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own.
Yeah, the main verse in that section is verse 33. So the whole thing leads up to verse 33. The birds, God takes care of the birds. He provides them with food. They're not storing up food in barns. God takes care of the flowers and clothes them, makes them beautiful, even though they don't last long. So verse 33 is the meaning. Seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things, what we need to eat, what we need to drink, our clothes, will be given to you as well. So Jesus is answering the question on the page for us, which was, it's been said keeping the seventh commandment is as simple as keeping the first. How is this true? God knows we need stuff, right? He knows you can't live without food and clothing and a place to sleep and all that. And he provides for you. And so it's neat to say, God, I'm going to trust you to provide what I need and not worry about it. So I've shared a couple of examples of this in the past. I remember telling you once, like when we were students, when I was a student and my wife, we'd just gotten married and she'd just come back from Africa and she had a bad dentist when she was in Africa. So she went to the dentist and they said, you need close to $10,000 worth of dental work to fix the problem. And we didn't have the money. And I went to my school and said, I have to pay this for my wife's, she was in pain. She had to get the dental work. But then I can't pay my tuition. So I don't know what to do. And some old lady, I think, I don't know, she never found out who did, heard about that and like the next day paid for all of my tuition. It was amazing. I still don't know. No, I don't know. But that was an example of how we were just trusting God was going to get us through the next day. And he, in an amazing way, he did. It was so generous of her. So anyway, that's the point. You don't need to steal, because we can say, God, if you want me to have a new phone or a new car or whatever, you will help to provide that. Let's do the eighth commandment. I did the seventh commandment because I think the seventh commandment is definitely one that it's easy to worry about stuff. And the temptation to steal or to be greedy is always present. And even if you're not looking for it, like you get bombarded with ads saying you need a new phone, you need a new bike, you better vacation. The internet is not being kind to us today. It keeps cutting out on our recording for Miyuki. We're back again, Miyuki. You didn't miss anything. I think it only lasted a second. Okay, let's do the The eighth commandment. The eighth commandment. So the eighth commandment is, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. What does this mean? We should fear and love God, that we do not tell lies about our neighbor, betray him or her, or give him a bad name, but defend him, speak well of him, and take his words and actions in the kindest possible way. So the seventh commandment, by the way, is protecting possessions. I didn't write that on the board, but it's protecting possessions, things you own that you need for your daily life. What is the eighth commandment protecting in that explanation? We should fear and love God, that we do not tell lies about our neighbor, betray our neighbor, or give our neighbor a bad name. Trustworthiness, yeah, that you can be a trustworthy person. You're not gonna.
You all trust everyone. Nobody give you bad testimony about you.
Yeah, I think the word, this should be a vocabulary word perhaps, is actually the word that describes all this is reputation. Reputation is it might even be on the sheet at the top.
Yeah, it is on the sheet.
Number 11, reputation. So let's see that again. Reputation right here. A person's good name. A person's good name is your reputation. So if when people hear your name, if they think of good things, that's good for you. You're a nice person, you're kind, you're friendly. If they hear your name and they think bad things, oh, Grace, I don't like her, that hurts, right? That really is hurtful. So this commandment is protecting reputation. What would people think of us? What people think of us. Yeah, because so there's some of the explanation here is, we should fear, love God. We do not tell lies about our neighbor. Telling a lie is obviously hurting someone's reputation. If you say, did you hear what Grace did last week? Blah, 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 blah. That hurts, especially if it's a lie. It's not true what happened. Betray, what does betray? I'm looking at what does this mean part. Betray them, betray him or her. Yeah, so to you I say, oh, I'm your friend. I'm not meaning to pick on you, Grace, but I kind of am. But I say, oh, I really like you, Grace. You're so special to me. But then I turn around and stab you in the back and tell everybody your secrets and say, I really hate her. She's not a nice person. That's betray, right? Judas betrayed Jesus. He was his friend, his disciple. And then he said, I'm going to sell him for 30 pieces of silver. That's betray. Or give him or her a bad name. So one thing that people like to do, we call gossip, right? Gossip. What is gossip?
Very popular.
Did you hear?
Very popular.
Yeah, a lot of people love to gossip. They love to tell the juicy news. Did you hear what Grace did last week? And then you tell that. What if the thing you tell is true? What if the thing you tell is true?
One way to explain.
It's okay, go ahead. What if the thing we tell is true? Does that make this okay? That's the question, because you could say, well, I don't lie. I'm only telling the truth. Therefore, it can't be bad. Is it okay as long as you are telling the truth? Is it okay as long as you tell the truth?
If I tell truth, is that also called gossip?
If you tell the truth, gossip is it. You can tell the truth about someone, and it can be gossip. Yes, right.
That also gossip.
Oh, for sure. What's the point of you telling that story? Are you telling the story because it's building? If I tell a story about you, and maybe it's true, I don't know. I'm going to make something up, Grace. I don't know why I'm picking on you, but just because you're at the end of the table, I guess. Let's say you got a speeding ticket, and you were talking to me about that, driving your car. And I say, did you hear Grace got a speeding ticket? That may be true, but why am I telling the story? Am I trying to make people think better of you? Or am I saying, oh, look how irresponsible Grace is. Look how, what a bad driver Grace is, right? Am I trying to build you up or tear you down?
No.
Tear down. That is the problem. There is a motivation behind me telling the story that is not to give you a good name, but to take your good name and make it worse and make people think twice about trusting you to get in your car, or whatever it might be, right? So gossip is sharing sharing stories, opinions, or secrets, not to build up another's reputation. So it could be for entertainment. Sometimes gossip is fun, right? That's entertainment. But it could be the intention is to hurt someone's reputation. That is absolutely, in that case, sinful. Right? That's why the giving false testimony, you can give true testimony and break the 8th commandment because you're trying to hurt the way people think of another person. And then that matters because if everybody thinks you're a bad driver, will we want to go with you if you invite us in your car? No. That hurts your reputation. So we don't want to hurt people's reputations. Again, with all of these commandments, we easily could spend a whole period on them. We look up dozens of passages that talk about this topic of reputation. There are many passages in scriptures about reputation. And there's a lot of application for this, especially with the social media, even celebrity gossip. Like, how do you think even if they're rich and famous people, how do they feel about having their own pictures and their personal stories end up in the news? Does that make them feel good? No, it makes them feel bad. And so that it's entertaining for us who read it, perhaps, but it's hurting the reputation of those people. And that's why God says, don't do it. Don't do gossip. So I think even another word, false testimony and slander. Slander is when you tell a lie or a hurtful truth to damage another person's reputation. It has a very obvious, gossip has maybe more of an entertaining. Slander, you're obviously trying to hurt the way other people think about someone. So we we don't. Neither one of those things are God pleasing. Now, Martin Luther says, instead of hurting people's reputations or gossiping, what should we do? What should we do? He says, but defend them, speak well of them, and take their words and actions in the kindest possible way. Let's look at a verse about that, which is Proverbs 31 on the page. I don't know whose turn it is to read. Maybe is it back to you, Grace? I think you or Yuri. Okay.
For what?
Proverbs 31.
For 31, 8, 9. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy.
Destitute means people who are without what they need. They don't have food. They don't have a job. They're in trouble because they don't have what they need. So how does this verse say we should keep the 8th commandment instead? Especially the first part. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. That's what the verse is encouraging us to do. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Let's say you're hanging out with a group of friends and some of your friends are there, but that group has more friends who are not there. So the people who aren't there, someone starts to talk about one of them. Oh, did you hear so-and-so did this? What is this passage saying you should do?
Against absent.
Mm-hmm. That means if someone is absent, if someone's not there, and everybody is starting to say negative or bad things that hurt their reputation, you can say, I don't know if we should really be talking about so-and-so behind her back. We don't know all the situation. We don't understand what happened. And I think it's not fair to her if we're attacking her personality or her character and she can't even defend herself. That's not easy to do. It's because gossip is really fun and people love to do it and they think, well, you're no fun. That's not very, very entertaining. We want to tell all these secrets. But one thing to always think about, and there are other proverbs and passages that speak about when you defend someone and you're standing up for them, what are you showing about yourself to all the people who you know? I can be, if you defend me, then, and I'm not there, you're saying, well, we shouldn't talk like this about pastor. You're showing everybody else, I can be trusted. I am not going to badmouth you when you're gone. Because that's the thing, when we gossip, like, oh, maybe we're gossiping about Miyuki. We're saying Miyuki's not here. We can say whatever we want, blah, blah, blah. She can't defend herself. But later on, when you're not here, what do we do? Same thing. Yeah. Instead, by not talk, if we talk about others behind their back, then people will start to realize when I'm gone, you're going to talk about me. But if I'm defending people recognize I can really trust Grace, or I can really trust Miyuki, or I can really, that's value. That's something that actually increases our own reputations. So there's a blessing from that. And then the second part of the question is, we keep the eighth command by defending people, especially when culture so often heaps shame upon people when they fail. There are Western culture is doing this too now, but like the shame and honor concept. When somebody has done something shameful, we can all recognize that it happens. People do things because we're sinful. And instead of giving forgiveness, it's like, okay, even if you say you're sorry, we're going to pile on the shame. And they call it cancel culture. Have you seen that in the news? Yeah. Canadians are doing that right now. Cancel culture, it's the idea that if you do something that is against what people think you should do, they can cancel you. Like we won't be friends with you anymore. If you have a business, we'll stop using your business so you lose business. That's cancel culture, right? So it's a pile-on thing. Other cultures do that. African cultures do that. If there's someone who's prominent or important in the society, like a village elder or a leader, and one person makes an accusation, all of a sudden everybody will turn against that one person, and they'll be like ruined. Like they lose their job, they lose their family has to leave. No one will help them. That just like ruins people's lives. That happens. Does that happen in your cultures at all? Like where somebody does something and instead of forgiving them, everybody just attacks. That's in a way what this is saying. When our culture heaps shame, like everybody attacks that one person. No one ever stops to say, if that was me, what would that be doing to my life to be attacked in that way? So the eighth commandment is do not give false testimony against your neighbor. Instead, defend them. Now, sometimes people say the eighth commandment says, do not lie. Do not lie. Do not give false testimony, period. And maybe the lie is not hurting someone's reputation. Maybe the lie is, I'm just trying to make myself look better, right? I don't know. Say I spilled the coffee. And then someone goes, oh, what happened in here? I don't know. I didn't do that. That also is, in a sense, breaking the eighth commandment because I'm not willing to admit my own guilt. Instead, I'm trying to let someone else get in trouble for it, and then we all are tempted to break the eighth commandment in that way. And then I guess you could say, going back to my earlier illustration where I suggested Grace got a speeding ticket. And let's say that happened, the police pulled you over right in front of the church. And so everybody could see out the windows you're getting a ticket. Right? And so that's even worse because now everybody can say, oh my goodness, there's a police car out there. What's happening? And you come in and I find out, oh, you had the ticket. And then everyone else is like, oh, did you see that? Who is it who got the ticket? I could say it was Grace, and everybody, you'd feel like that shame. But going back to the rule of love that Paul said, well, keeping the commandments is love. Is it loving to speak the truth and to let someone's reputation get hurt? Or is it more loving to acknowledge that sometimes we don't need to know certain information? It's not our business to ask who got the ticket.
That's not our business. That would be a better answer, wouldn't it? Because now I'm trying to protect your reputation, but I'm not trying to lie either. Challenge is that sometimes we can read each other and we can know, oh, you're protecting somebody. Who was it, Pastor? We know you saw. That's a tricky thing with the eighth commandment. I will also use an example of like, if the Nazis knocked on your door and said, are you hiding Jews? What's the loving thing to do? Is to lie. So I'm protecting those people's lives, their reputation, but I have to do that by lying. So there are situations where it's actually more God-pleasing to not give the truth, but that's rare. It's just, I'm sharing that so you can recognize the real issue is reputation and protecting people. And sometimes we do have to acknowledge if everybody saw you got a ticket and to acknowledge that and then have like public, I'm sorry, what I did was wrong, but then we publicly forgive that too. So there was a situation in my old congregation where that happened. A young lady who was a member of our church, she got pregnant. She wasn't married. She broke the sixth commandment with her boyfriend. She was 17. You can't hide that, especially when her belly was getting big with the baby. She stopped coming to church because she knew if she came to church, everyone would see she was pregnant. Well, she had the baby. You can't hide that either. So what happened? We let her come to church one day to baptize the baby. And in the baptism, we acknowledged that the baby was born out of marriage. And she repented in front of the whole congregation and said, what I did, she acknowledged was sinful and that she wanted God's forgiveness. But what did that do for the congregation is it gave everyone the chance to restore her reputation and to forgive her and to welcome her back. So there are situations where we do have to speak up for someone so that it's not like, well, look what this person did. We can't have her be in our church anymore. She needed that public forgiveness because it was a public sin in a way. Everybody knew that had happened. So I'm just sharing this so you understand some of the things. We can't spend all day on this. So let's spend a little bit of time on, actually, let me stop. Do you have any questions, or what questions do you have about the eighth commandment and reputation? Anything that comes to mind, practical or otherwise? Social media has made this so much harder. The eighth commandment, so much harder because of social media. Because now people are posting sinful things right on their Facebook page. You're like, oh, do I acknowledge that? Did I see you doing that? That's wrong. Pretend I didn't see. Or hit share.
Keep people's secrets.
Yeah.
Or if you find out some secrets,
talk to that person first, and say, well, what's going on, rather than tell everyone else, oh, did you hear what so-and-so is doing? This has definitely gotten much harder. I think the eighth commandment, because of the internet and social media, it's gotten so much harder to be following this. And it's tricky because what do you do in any situation? If it's public knowledge, or is it secret knowledge? Is it, there's so many things. We could do a whole class on just keeping the eighth commandment. Not by that, I mean several weeks. Okay, 9th and 10th commandment, do not covet. The hardest part for the 9th and 10th commandment is, what is coveting?
What is coveting? So on our page, we're going to switch to the 8th commandment, or the 9th commandment, and we'll read both together because as I said, there's a small distinction between the two. Can I ask you, Grace, to read the 9th commandment and the what does this mean? And then Masood, can you read the 10th commandment and the what does this mean? On page, the last page.
You shall not covet your neighbor's house. We should fear and love God, and we do not scheme to get our neighbor's inheritance or house, or obtain it by a show of right, but do all we can to help him keep it.
The 10 commandment.
Mm-hmm.
You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, workers, animals, or anything that belong to your neighbor. What that this means? We should fear and love God, that we do not force or entice away our neighbor's spouse, workers, or animals, but urge them to stay and do their duty.
Mm-hmm. So, one way of distinguishing these two commandments, the 9th commandment is about house, 10th commandment is about spouse. House and spouse. I picked that because they rhyme and it makes it easier to remember. House, don't covet someone's house, don't covet someone's spouse. Another way of summarizing that is stuff, right? And I will put, instead of spouse, maybe relationships. People. You could say animals too. I don't think in modern culture people are coveting animals because most of us don't have them. Or if we do, it's like, oh, your dog is so cute, or your cat, I like your cat. But I don't think people covet pets in the same way that in years past, where if you had a farm, you had animals like that, that would be slightly different, I guess, because the animals, they're possessions in a way, but they're also creatures through which you can have a relationship in a way. Like my dog and I have a relationship in the sense that even if he's a dog, he still knows me and I know him in a way. And you understand that if you have a pet, like your pet knows you. Unless it's a fish, because I don't think fish care. So I haven't had a fish, so I couldn't speak to that. So stuff, and I'll put relationships, mostly people, but animals. What, the word entice was in there. That maybe should have been a vocabulary word. Entice. That was in the explanation to the 10th commandment, the word entice. And entice is a word that it means to, I'm going to see if I can explain this well in a simple way. You try to get somebody to allure or pull, like you're trying to lead them or pull them away from something. So the picture that entice has is like if you, let's say you're with your dog, I'll use a dog. If you started to lay some treats on the floor, one after the other, to lead the dog into a cage, that's entice. You're like, ooh, and they follow that over here. So with people, we could entice people by maybe you be nice to them, but what you're really trying to do is get them to switch to you. Yeah, like he uses the word workers. So maybe you have a business and this guy over here, you really wish he worked for your company, but he's working for another one. So you be like, well, our company is better, and here's why. And I'm a nice guy. And if you come to our company, we'll give you this. So what you're really doing is trying to steal him from a competitor by laying down nice things like the treats with the dog to have him come and be in your join you. That's one thing. Adultery does that too. Like it's leading someone away from their spouse.
To prepare a trap.
Yeah, I mean, you're not trying to be mean to the person you're stealing or you're taking, but you're taking someone away from a relationship they already have, you know?
Take some advantage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like trapping.
Mhm. There's a Bible story about this that it's quite a lengthy one actually. So I'll try to sum it up. But King David was ruling Israel. Maybe we read this a couple years ago. He's ruling Israel, and then his son Absalom started to entice the people to follow him. And what Absalom did was his plan was to take over for his father and get rid of his father. And he did that by standing at the gate where people would come to the court. And rather than have them see the king as a judge, he said, I'm the prince. Let me settle your dispute for you. And he was nice to them. So everyone loved him. And then one day he declared that he should be the king. And then all of a sudden there was a big war. Israel was divided, and King David had to run for his life because Absalom and the people were rebelling against him. All because Absalom spent a long time getting everyone to like him more. That was entice. Yeah.
Can I say tempt instead of entice?
Kind of. Kind of. It's you're kind of pulling or leading someone to come to your side. So if you had another way you could use entice is breaking the 8th commandment. You could say maybe you have a fight with another friend, and you're trying to get a mutual friend to be on your side by being nice to them and making them think the other person's bad. That'd be entice.
Temptation.
This is a hard word. Yeah,
Different.
it's a hard word. Temptation is just feeling the desire to commit a sin. Whereas this is like trying to get someone else on your side, whether it's with promises or being nice, but by doing that, you're turning them against someone else. Anyway, the 9th commandment, do not covet your neighbor's house. 10th commandment, do not covet your neighbor's wife, workers, animals, children, people, relationships. Now, the real question is, what do the 9th and the 10th commandments protect? Also, we're going to have to talk about what is coveting, because maybe let's talk about that first, and then what is covet then? If you covet someone's stuff or relationships, what is covet? I'm going to erase the stuff off the slide so we can put what is covet up here. If we can understand what is covet, these two will make sense. But what is the word covet? Tricky, huh? Even if I gave you the definition on the first page. Thankfully, you have a Bible passage on here
Stuff of all.
that helps us to define the verse. So it's James chapter 4, 1 and 2. So it's on the page if you want, or you can look it up. I'm going to look it up just so I can see better. Paul also talks about this in the book of Romans, I believe. James 4, 1 to 2. Yeah, it's right on the page. You don't actually have to look it up.
James 4:1-2. What causes right and false among you? Don't say come from you desire that, but rule within you. You desire, but do not have, so you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel
Quarrel, yeah, like arguing.
and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God.
So James is talking about coveting. The second sentence of verse 1 is very helpful to understanding coveting. Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire, but you do not have, so you kill. Covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. So coveting is a tricky sin to understand, because unlike these first, well, especially these number 4 to 8, we all understand what murder is. We all understand what adultery is. We can all understand respecting authority. But this one is different. This one's different, right? Because of the key word here is, it is a desire. How is that making coveting different than, say, stealing or adultery or disrespect, or even get any of these? How is coveting different as with the word desire?
Just from inside out.
Yeah.
Our heart.
This one does not happen outside of your heart. It's not an act. There's no act that you could. It's not a. It's a verb, like you do it, but it's an internal thing, right? I can't see if you're coveting. You can do other things that show me you're coveting, but if you're breaking this commandment, a desire is not something you do, or it's not an act, whereas stealing is an act. I could videotape you stealing. I could videotape you murdering. I could videotape you breaking the 4th commandment if you're being disrespectful or disobeying authority. You can videotape it, but you can't videotape coveting. You just see someone standing there. On the other hand, sinful desires also give way to sinful actions. So if I saw you standing outside of my house just staring at it, I might suspect there's some coveting happening here. That you're what is covet? That your desire lets me see what's going on inside your heart by your actions. But it is, at the heart of it, it is a sinful desire more than anything else. A sinful desire. So let's put a definition here. It is a sinful desire. Now, what kind of desire? What makes coveting sinful as opposed to, you can desire a cookie, and that would not be sinful. What makes it coveting? So that's the tricky part. What makes it coveting? What does James say in these verses here that help us to understand the idea of coveting? What makes this desire sinful from that desire, which is not sinful?
You do not have because you do not ask God.
Okay, so you're not You're not seeking from God. So you're going against God by kind of saying, well, I want this. I don't care what God says. I'm going to go around God because I really want this thing. The commandments themselves help too. It says, do not covet your neighbor's house. Do not covet your neighbor's wife, worker, or animals, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. What is the thing I'm desiring? It's something that belongs rightly to someone else. So by me desiring something that rightly belongs to you, what am I desiring? I'm desiring something God says I should not have, right? So it's a desire for something I should not have.
Or I should not try to take it or try to do something.
Yeah.
If I want your house, I don't do anything like that. Oh, I wish I had your house.
I have a nice house. Yeah. No. you could say, yeah, I want your house. But I could say, but my house isn't for sale. In that case,
I don't work, I don't do anything.
yeah,
Wish I had your house.
that would be coveting, right? You're wanting something you should not have, or something God does not want you to have, and that becomes sinful when we allow that desire to kind of linger, get bigger. Oftentimes, it will lead to any one of these sins, right? If you want my house, and you're like, well, I don't care if it's not for sale. Somehow, I have to take it, and you could find a way to take it from me. Maybe a lawsuit. Maybe you have a dishonest deal to get it sold, or stealing it. Even if you can't steal a house very easily, but you can steal the stuff in the house. So it leads to all these other sins because I want something that I'd like to have and I can't get it. One of the in a way, the ninth and 10th commandment is a doorway to breaking all the other commandments. So I'll give you an example. King David, you mentioned him. King David, he's the king, so he's rich. He has a big palace. He wasn't coveting other people's houses, although there are examples of that. But he broke the 10th commandment. So in 2 Samuel chapter 11, the story is David sent his army off to war. He didn't go, which he really should have been. And instead, one night he was up on his roof. He has a big palace, so his roof is probably higher than everyone else's. And from the rooftop, he spotted a beautiful woman named Bathsheba who was taking a bath. So he saw her without her clothes on. And he said, ooh, she's very beautiful. Someone go and bring her to me. So they brought Bathsheba, and David slept with her, and she got pregnant. And so now his coveting for this beautiful woman, Bathsheba, led him to break which commandment? That he slept with her even though they weren't married and she was married to someone else.
6.
The 6th commandment, right? So now he's broken the 10th commandment and he's broken the 6th commandment. All right? Now, she sends him a message. She says, David, I'm pregnant. I have a baby. So he's like, oh. Well, her husband was one of his soldiers. His name was Uriah. So David said, send me Uriah from the battlefield to give me a report. It's not really why he wanted him. He brought Uriah to the capital, to his palace, and he said, oh, how is the battle going? He's like, okay, well, have a good night. Go home, spend time with your wife, and we'll see you again tomorrow before you go back.
Well, Uriah was trying to follow God's will, and he said, it's not right for me to go home and hang out with my wife when my fellow soldiers are in the battlefield. Because why should I get to spend time with my family and enjoy life while they're fighting? So instead of going home, he slept outside of the gate of the palace by himself. And can you tell what David was trying to do? He wanted Uriah to go home, sleep with his wife so that it would be covered up. He was trying to break the 8th commandment so that everyone would think the baby was his baby and not David's baby. But Uriah refused to do it. So he tried again. Then he got him drunk, and which endangers Uriah's life. That's breaking the 5th, getting someone drunk, hurting their body. And he says, oh yeah, go home and have fun with your wife, and we'll see you again tomorrow. But again, Uriah just went outside and slept on the ground. Well, David's like, this isn't working. I need him to go home, but he won't. So instead, he wrote a note to the general, said, when Uriah is back, make sure he fights the battle in the front line where the fighting is the most dangerous, so that when the enemies are throwing down things from their city walls, Uriah will get shot or with an arrow or get crushed with a rock or whatever, and he'll die. So that's what the guy did. He put Uriah in a dangerous place in the battle, and then sent a note back to David saying, well, we fought the battle, but the people fought against us, and by the way, Uriah the Hittite was killed. So what did David do? Now he broke the 5th commandment. So just the 10th commandment leads to breaking the 6th commandment, the 8th commandment. You could argue the 7th commandment because he was stealing his wife, and the 5th commandment, and most of all, the 1st commandment, because God was most displeased that David had done this and loved breaking the 6th commandment more than him, loved covering it up more than speaking the truth. So he's breaking like all of these commandments, but it starts with this one. So that's the last question on the page. How do the 9th and 10th commandments teach us the commandments are all to be interpreted also as sins in the heart and not just sins of action? Like, do not murder is not just stabbing a knife in somebody, but it's also the 9th, even hate or anger. The 9th and the 10th commandments are about a sin of the heart, meaning a sinful desire. But because you can't see a sinful desire and it leads to breaking the other commandments, God is trying to get us to recognize that sinfulness is not just outward actions, but it's also internal thoughts of our heart, which makes the desire for murder, the desire to commit adultery, greed, which is the desire to take stuff or to steal, all of that is coveting too. Even if you don't actually steal or commit adultery or carry out murder, when you desire something that's not yours sinfully, you're breaking all those commands too. So God, a sinful desire for something I should not have, I guess it could also be a sinful desire for something that is sinful, like committing adultery would be sinful. You recognize that. But the fact that I want that is in itself breaking that commandment about coveting. That is a good
way for us to understand this sin, because it's the most difficult one to understand. But once we do, we recognize that all of these commandments are things that we can break just because our attitude is wrong. And it leads us to repent, leads us to say, God, you even judge the attitudes of my heart. It's not just what I do, it's also how I think and feel. And may you forgive me for that, because we break all the commandments all the time when we realize that it's even our attitude, getting angry at somebody, wishing for a better bike or a better phone or a better vacation or whatever it might be in your case. Oh, and I didn't put down on the sheet, there was a question about what are they protecting? What do the 9th and 10th commandments protect? Share screen again. What do the 9th and 10th commandments protect?
Sins.
I'm sorry, what?
Protect us about sins.
Yeah, it's protecting our I'll say our hearts. By heart, that means your internal thoughts and feelings and everything like that. That it's not just, God is protecting everything about us. It's not just, I want to protect the outward action. Even to have a clean heart and a clean mind is what God is hoping for. So, but if you give God your heart, going back to the beginning, I said it's sacrificing yourself as a living sacrifice. I could spend every day doing my very best to keep these 10 commandments, and that would keep me very busy every day for the rest of my life. Whether it's honoring my spouse and loving her and trying to be kind and do things for her or my children, or the 7th commandment, working hard at my job, because if you are lazy, you're stealing from your boss. You could work 40 hours a week, but you're really spending half of that time on Facebook or playing games on your computer, or not working, just daydreaming. But if I'm working hard, then I know I'm trying to build up my boss's business, or being in God's word every day with a devotion is a 3rd commandment, something like that. We can do these and they'll keep us busy until we go home to heaven, because there's a lot to do. So I hope that just kind of overview of the commandments is worthwhile, just to see God doesn't demand weird or arbitrary. You know that word, arbitrary? No. It's a good word to know. Arbitrary. Arbitrary. It's an adjective, and it means something without good reason. I'll give you an example. I was just talking to a member on Sunday. He was frustrated about camping. He said, my family wants to go camping, but as you know, with COVID, the province shut down many of the parks, right? Some parks are open and some parks are closed. Some parks you can camp in and some parks you can't. And the question is why? Why are these parks open and these parks closed? He said, it's arbitrary. It feels arbitrary. He can't see any good reason why this park is open and that park is closed. Why not this park be open and this park be closed? There's no reason. So that's the idea. If you don't have a reason, it's arbitrary. Let me give you an example of a religious idea, a command that would be that feels arbitrary. do not eat shellfish. Do not eat shrimp, lobster, crab, shellfish. Does that seem arbitrary? Why should you not eat shellfish? Or do not eat pork. Why not eat pork? It feels arbitrary. God doesn't give us arbitrary laws, and the Ten Commandments are not arbitrary. If there was a commandment that said, "You shall not eat chocolate," you might say, "But why? I can't see a reason." All of these, you can see a good reason. All of them are trying to protect something that incredibly important and valuable. They're not arbitrary. Catholics have a law, a rule, for which people feel a tremendous amount of guilt, but you should not eat meat on Friday. On Friday, don't eat meat. Why? It's not in the Bible. But a lot of people feel more guilt about eating steak on a Friday than, say, telling the truth, than telling a lie. And there's something wrong with that. So again, God doesn't give us arbitrary commandments. The Ten Commandments are very much building up families and society and helping us. And so we should want to keep the Ten Commandments as much as possible. And then don't worry about chocolate and steak and shellfish. Those things are God gives to us in freedom. So he doesn't give arbitrary laws. And we can benefit from the Ten Commandments every day. Like doing them will give us a happy, healthy, good life in a way. So, yeah. All right. Do you have questions about any of 7, 8, 9, 10, or any of these commandments? We focused on these last 4. Last week we covered these 3. So 3 weeks to cover 10 commandments. It's actually pretty good. Like I said, we could easily spend 2.5, 3 months going through the commandments and going through all the different meanings they have.
I have a question, not about this.
Okay.
While I read Bible, Lamentations.
Lamentations.
2, 3.
Okay, give me a second. You want me to put it on the board so they can look up the verse? You want them to look up too? I'll put it on the board. Lamentations, the Old Testament. It's the book after Jeremiah, if that helps you. It's in the Old Testament. Lamentations chapter 2, verse 3.
I don't understand. He has burned in Jacob like a flaming fire that consumes everything around it. God has burned in Jacob.
Jacob is another nickname for the nation of Israel.
Another name?
Well, so Jacob, nation of Israel, comes from one family. God made a promise to Abraham, and he said, Abraham, your descendants will be like the stars in the sky. I'm going to make a great nation out of you. Remember? Mm-hmm. Then Abraham had Isaac, and Isaac had 2 sons, Esau and Jacob. Mm-hmm. And Jacob had 12 sons, and those sons became the names for the 12 tribes of Israel. Mm-hmm. So the nation of Israel, the last single guy who is the father of the nation is Jacob. And the nation of Israel was named after him because when he wrestled God in Genesis 32, God gave him a new name. He said, now your name shall be Israel, for you wrestled with God and lived. So when you see the name Jacob, it's a way of saying Israel. It's a name for Israel. Right. God isn't saying he burned, like if you substitute the idea of Israel there, he has burned in Jacob like a flaming fire and consumes everything around it. He is saying God's anger has been fighting against the whole country of Israel. And so it's very common for Israel and Jacob to be used interchangeable, like the same name used for the country, because Israel is the same person as Jacob, right? It's a literary device. So it's a way of saying, like, I used the example of a car earlier with you. Said, "Oh, you have a nice set of wheels." Have you ever heard that before? You have a nice set of wheels. If I say you have a nice set of wheels, what am I really saying? You have a nice car. But by saying wheels, what I mean is your whole car, not just the wheels on the car. That's this figure of speech. That's what's happening here. By saying Jacob, he's saying the whole nation of Israel.
I thought it's weird. Jacob, God blessed Jacob.
He did. But now the nation of Israel in Lamentations, the whole point of this book is Jeremiah records the sorrow that Jacob, the nation, has because they turned against God. And then in the year 586 BC, that's when Jeremiah lived, God sent the kingdom of Babylon, and they conquered Israel, or what was left of it, Judah and Benjamin, these two tribes, and carried them off to exile and destroyed the land. So when he says in fierce anger, God has cut off every horn of Israel. He has withdrawn his right hand at the approach of the enemy. He has burned in Jacob like a flaming fire. He's saying God allowed all of this destruction and to come to the nation. So the picture of the horn is a picture of strength, like a bull has horns. Well, it has a picture, or a ram has horns. It's a picture of strength, but also they had at the temple there was an altar that they would give their sacrifices on, and in the corner of each of this altar there was a horn. So it was a picture of that forgiveness and strength with God. And to cut off the horn, you would think of the altar losing its horns, like it loses its value. God has destroyed it and said it's no more. And that's what the Babylonians did. They destroyed the temple. They could no longer worship God. He didn't stop the enemies, and he allowed them to destroy the whole country. So fire, it's a warning of judgment. And now, this is one of the saddest books in the Bible, by the way, Lamentations. It's just, woe is us. I'm filled with sadness. There's nothing good here. But in the middle of the book, there is a short but brief hope in God. So turn to chapter 3, verse 30, 24, 25, 26, 27. This is the only spot in the whole book that is like, has hope, right? Actually starts at 21. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. Remember just a minute ago, he said, consumed by fire. God's love keeps us from being completely consumed. His compassion never fails. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I will say to myself, the Lord is my portion. Therefore I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those who hope in him, to the one who seeks him. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for the man to bear the yoke while he is young. That's it. Pretty much the rest of the book, it's like he's attacked us, he's hurt us, he's allowed all this bad stuff to happen. We repent, we're sorry. But here he's saying, I put my hope in God. I wait for him to save me. I'm going to quietly wait for what God is going to do, because I can't do anything. So that's, you might find it strange that in the middle of the book of sadness, you have this one brief piece of hope. But oftentimes in the Old Testament, this is a weird feature of Hebrew thinking. We don't think like this. We think, if you watch a movie, right? I'm going to make a graph. If you watch a movie, oftentimes there's sort of I guess, an exciting beginning, and then it builds to a great finale, right? This is at the end of the movie, the big battle. The hero has to defeat the bad guy, and then everything is saved. I mean, or the woman and the man, they're falling in love, but things fall apart, and then it gets very, very exciting. And at the end, they're together. So we get excited about the end. And this is just say excitement, right? How exciting. Excitement. It's way up here at the end. It builds to the end. Hebrews didn't think that way. They think like this. It's more like a mountain. This is very, very, very common in the Psalms, in the books. The middle is the spot that he draw the most attention to. This is the middle of Lamentations. So it's like sad, 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 sad. Brief happy spot. Sad, 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 sad. I'm still hoping in God. A lot of the books in the Old Testament function this way. If you go, I don't understand this, find the middle. That's the point that they're getting at. And it can get more complex than this. It's extremely simplified. That you could have, as it's building up, you could have sections. So in the first section, there's a little peak. In the second section, there's a little peak. And there's the big peak like this. So you can have 5, say, spots. And these 4 all point to this one. But they also are brief moments of hope. It gets more complex. But the point is, in the middle is where you tend to find the important spot. So this is the middle of Lamentations. But I hope that helps you with the book. Okay. Yeah, you're welcome to ask questions like that. I'm going to stop the recording though. So bye, Miyuki. We hope you can watch this.